All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heart Institute for Women Conductors 23-24 virtual session live stream number 3. My name is Jennifer McGill, and I am the Artistic Operations Administrator here at the Dallas Opera, and I will be moderating the conversation we are going to have today. I'm joined here by our 4 participant conductors, Maria Benyumova, Micah Gleason, Shira Samuel Schrag, and Jingqi Zhu, as well as our master teachers, Elizabeth Askren, Paolo Bressan, Nicole Paiement, and Emmanuel Villaume. As part of HIWC, each of the master teachers is named as the head of one of the 4 operas that the participants will be studying this year. This year, Elizabeth Askren will be the instructor of Le Nozze di Figaro. Paolo Bressan will be the instructor of Suor Angelica. Nicole Paiement will be the instructor of The Consul. And Emmanuel Villaume will be the instructor of Vanessa. All 4 of our master teachers have conducted in opera houses around the world. Now, before they were our master teachers that we know today, they were once first-time conductors, and before that, conducting students themselves, who once had dreams of working their way up to the top. So with that, I'm going to look at our master teachers, and I'd love to start with Elizabeth, and then we can go from there. I want to know, and I think a lot of us are wanting to know, can you give us or talk a little bit about yourselves and where your career has led you so far?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you all today. I am a born and raised New Yorker, and music has taken me all across the world and in very unexpected places. So I don't think that my first years are terribly typical, because in Europe, for example, if you are training to be a classical musician, they put you into that JAG pretty early on. And I didn't do that. You know, one of the questions is, how did you find conducting? Conducting kind of found me. When I was 2.5, I used to take my Tinker toys and I would make batons out of them, conducting batons, and I'd prop my storybook up and I'd conduct to whatever was on the radio. So that's how I kind of got into piano lessons. I started piano when I was 3. And then by the time I was 10, my piano teacher said, you know, I don't think I can teach you much more, and I think you need to go on to the next step. So I was fortunate that she knew someone at the Juilliard Pre-College Division, and she introduced me to Mr. Richard Faber. And from then on, I had lessons with him, and I was able to attend Juilliard Pre-College, and from there on to Oberlin Conservatory. And then I found 2 wonderful teachers, and here's where it comes. I had 2 Italian teachers whom I met in Salzburg who taught in Paris during the year. And they were so wonderful that I said, I have to, you know, study with these teachers. And so I was able to win a scholarship offered by the Fondation des États-Unis, and to go over to Paris and to study with both of them at the Schola Cantorum, and then also take conducting at the École Normale de Musique de Paris. And that was in 1998, and that was supposed to be for 1 year, and 25 years later, I have just come back to the United States, and I've been living here for about a year now. So it's taken me all across the United States, in symphonic, in opera, throughout Europe, and I'm very excited to share whatever experiences might be useful and helpful to others.
That's wonderful and crazy that you've stayed, you know, you've gone so many places and stayed for other countries and all that for so long, and you found your love of music super early on at 3. That's awesome. What about you, Paolo? What's your journey?
Well, I started to make some to take some music lesson at my elementary school in my hometown, and then from them I went to the music school, And then later on, I went to the Conservatory in Milano, studying composition, piano, and orchestral and choir conducting. And then from them, I decided to make an Erasmus project with the Hochschule für Musik in Weimar. And I did just conducting and coaching. And from them, I started this German path, like Adorno was saying, the trustful substitute master. There is a book basically being a co-repetitor and then Solo Repetitor mit Dirigierverpflichtung. It means you are a coach and you have you must conduct, but you don't have right to do it, and they can oblige you. So my first opera was in the theater in Schwerin, in the north of Germany, Nozze di Figaro in German without rehearsal. So my mind was going in every direction, but I learned quite a bit. And then from there, I stayed 7 years, making a lot of experience as a conductor, but also as a pianist, because there you have to do everything. Because in the contract was written, you have to play all keyboards instruments. So they put me on doing the continuo in some Handel opera, so the organ in Tosca, and then I started to work as an assistant in different places and went into my path as a freelance conductor and pianist and coach. That's my path.
That's insane. I cannot even imagine doing Le Nozze di Figaro and just do it.
Barbiere in German. Bin ich Barbier, with all the tempi that were slower, because German language doesn't allow you to really go into the velocity of Italian, because, you know, Italian, we can talk for 3 seconds, saying 1,000 words and sometimes no meaning. In German, you can't. So
there you go. What about you, Nicole? What was your journey? You're still muted.
I was under the, I thought you were unmuting us, and my apologies. Yes, I was saying I enjoyed Paolo's story, and I think it could make an opera someday. It's a good story, Paolo. My journey was, I was born in Canada. I'm French Canadian, and I traveled quite a bit as a young person with my father, who was very dedicated to French outside in French communities. So I had the opportunity to be exposed to a lot of cultures and basically develop curiosity at a young age, because I had very curious parents. And I think that's one of the basic of who I am, is as a person, I'm incredibly curious and adventurous. And I think that sort of followed me through my career, my path. I studied abroad in Germany. I came to United States for a doctoral degree, and I was quite young when I finished my studies. So I decided, actually the president of Eastman School of Music suggested I go to California because I could learn English better. My English was not very good at the time. And also because it fitted perhaps my personality of not fitting a box, but kind of pushing boundaries. And they were right. Was supposed to be here for 2 years, and eventually I developed my career here and started an opera company that I very much enjoy in San Francisco. And I balanced that with my career guest conducting around the world.
That's wonderful. And we're glad you stayed. So. And your English is beautiful. So you're doing wonderfully, not to mention your wonderful conducting skills. What about you, Emmanuel? What is your journey?
So your English is beautiful, Nicole, but I can still spot an accent, and it's kind of similar to mine. And I was advised early on to keep the accent because it was part of the cachet, you know. So, and now I can't do any other way. It's very dangerous to ask a conductor to speak, because usually, and you guys have been very good, you've been short. We love to speak, and we love to speak about ourselves, and we're good at it. And I think one of the reasons is that we're frustrated on the podium. You know, we are told not to speak, or when it's a concert, you don't speak. And usually words come very easily to conductors. I've noticed that. What's interesting is our paths, Nicole, Elizabeth, and Paolo are quite different in many ways. And as I was discussing with some of you, there is no normal path or best path to be a conductor. And you will see that for each of us, there was a moment where we had to decide to be a conductor, even though that was not exactly the path that other people had for us, or people tell, well, you have not done this, you have not done that. From that point of view, I think I'm an extreme case because I had no right to be a conductor, and I took that right. And I really decided, okay, I want to do this and I'm going to do it. And of course, many people told me, no, you cannot do this. You have not done this and this and this and that. So I come from, I was born in Strasbourg. Strasbourg is in France, for the people who don't know it. But it has a German tradition in many ways when it comes to music. My father was an architect. My mother was a Catholic mother of 5 children, and she raised the children, but she studied as an interior designer. They both were very oriented toward the arts, but strangely enough, although their parents were all very active musicians, my parents were not musicians. So they were playing music at home through, LPs in the time. On the radio we would listen to music, but that they were not playing music. And so my connection as a performer started quite late, at 8 years old, and we were singing in the choir for the cathedral in Strasbourg, and at the same time the chorus was also the chorus for the opera. And this was somehow very serious training, you learn to read music and so on. But I do remember the first time I had my feet on stage at the Strasbourg Opera. It was a Turandot. And the smell of the makeup, these people screaming on the top of their lungs, and what was happening there, I knew it was my place. I really had, and I've talked to a lot of you, you all have this moment of epiphany. There was something in me that just wanted to go out. I didn't know it was in me, and there it was. And these people were very serious and very crazy at the same time. They had a lot to express. And I knew it was my place. I really knew right away it was my place. I then went to the conservatory in Strasbourg, where I studied a little cello and a lot of tuba too. So I played the tuba. Yes, I did. And then there was the classical training, harmony, and all the solfège, the French way classes, which can be quite demanding. But my parents didn't see me as a musician. They didn't want me to be a musician because it was not serious enough, and I was comfortable academically. So I did in Paris after my Abitur those classes that are called Hippocagne Kinds. It's a French system. So in 2 years you do the equivalent of what's now a master, and you can choose. You can do your master in 2 different, you can do a double or sometimes even a triple master. And so I chose philosophy, literature, and musicology. After that, I thought, I don't want to do musicology. I don't want to teach philosophy or literature. And I went back to Strasbourg, and I had already connection at the opera there. And I said, well, what can I do? Well, I said, what can you do? And I was a stage manager. I would write articles. I was a stage director assistant. And the first year I met a conductor, and I told him, oops, in fact, I wanted to be a conductor. I really wanted to. And he tested me, and he said, well, you have very good ears. What you need to learn is just to move your arms and conduct. And you know what? You're not really going to learn that in a conservatory. That was his point of view. He was a student of Nadia Boulanger. And he took me as his assistant in Spoleto, Italy. He tested me, said, yeah, you really don't know how to conduct, but you're going to learn. So when I went back to Strasbourg that whole year, I worked privately with the teacher who was teaching conducting at the conservatoire. And then the next year, I was the assistant of Spiros, and he wanted to hear Mahler free because it was the concerto in Piazza in Spoleto, so open air, and it was mic'd, amplified. And he said, well, why don't you go and do a few bars so I can hear how it works, Mahler free. I had never touched an orchestra in my life. I went there, and as I was saying to you privately, I was like a vampire testing blood for the first time after a long, long wait, and I loved it. And they had to take me out of the podium, by force. And there I had the second epiphany. All of a sudden, everything connected. Well, that's who I am. That's what I have to do. That's really what I have to do. Giancarlo Menotti was listening, and he said, well, next year we have in Charleston, because the two festivals were joined at the time, we have this Nozze di Figaro with this young soprano, what's her name, Renee Fleming or something like that. Why don't you give Emmanuel a few performances? And Spiro said, okay, well, yeah, if you ask it. And then the next year I did the Nozze di Figaro in Italian, not in German. And I survived. And then I was the assistant of Spiros all over the world, and I learned. That's how I learned. I learned by being assistant and working with him on production. And then I was also the assistant of Seiji Ozawa for many years, and I learned a lot from Seiji. Many details in those developments, but I think the common thing about our different paths is that at one point there is a decision that you take. And you get rejected, and you will get rejected. And one part of what makes people successful in this career is to be able to take rejection and move forward. And we all got rejected. We get rejected every day, actually, when we don't get chosen for a gig. So you have to be used to that, and you have to trust your strong internal conviction that you have a place and you have a right to it, and you are the only one who can decide if you have a right to it.
That's a very good and amazing answer, Emmanuel. I love it. And I'm just still trying to picture you as a tuba player, and it's wonderful. I'm sure you were a fantastic tuba player. Well, and then here's actually kind of a question I want to just quickly, and actually I'll start with Paolo. What was the moment that you knew I'm going to be a conductor? Like, this is where I'm supposed to be. I think we kind of got it with Emmanuel's, with him stepping on the podium and getting that first taste and them having to drag him off the podium. But I wanted to hear about the others as well. So let's start with Paolo.
For me, there was not this moment. It was a very long path, and I think I still have here. I had a pencil that my father gave. He was a social democrat, and he's written, "Keep it very strong and vote for the social democrat." In the same time, a neighbor brought to me all the symphony of Beethoven. He had it was the 80s. He brought me a music cassette of the Beethoven symphony, because I didn't have this big high fidelity stereo. They were very costly. And so I got this pencil that was somewhere on a table, and this music cassette, and I put the music cassette and I started to move my arm. And then I think, at a certain point on the Italian national TV, there was an announcement that Karajan was dead. And so, following the fact that I was hearing to his symphony, I went a little bit more into Karajan, and somehow this idea came in the back of my mind and followed me until the time that I went to Germany to study music, because I always wanted. I'm not a typical Italian that started with Puccini, Rossini. I started with Bach and Beethoven on the piano and went to Germany to discover that world. And in Germany, I discovered Puccini. But and then when I went to study, did this Erasmus and then a master at the University of Weimar, came this opportunity to work at the theater, and I started, but I cannot say that there was a moment where that is something that accompanied me all my life. There was not a moment where I said, that's it. It's a work in progress, let's say.
Well, that's perfect. It doesn't have to be a moment in particular, but that, I mean, just the fact that you had that journey that took you to Germany and helping you lead you to where you wanted to go, even with an open mind. That's still wonderful. What about you, Elizabeth?
Well, I guess it was a two-part journey. So the first one was when I was 15. I was a student at Juilliard Pre-College. I was there for piano. And Emmanuel, I also joined you because my parents were not music lovers. They were professional musicians, not at all. And I was going to a very competitive academic high school. And the idea was that I would go on to a very competitive university. And so when I got bitten by the music bug, and all of a sudden I got into Juilliard Pre-College, and so I was doing regular school 5 days a week, and then I got to go to Juilliard on Saturdays, where I could be with musicians, and we would sing, and we would play, and I took composition and all these things. Oh, it was just my dream. I lived for Saturdays. But this is where I got my first experience. So I was a composition student, and I made something that was too big. And it needed to be performed because this was the requirement, but it needed somebody to coordinate. And of course, who else is going to do that? You know, who's going to conduct a 15-year-old composition student in first year? This one. So this is what I did for the first time, and then it got recorded. I got all my friends together. You know, can you help me? Can you sing that? It was like singing. I had a string orchestra. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so we recorded it, and afterwards, I listened to the recording and I was laughing and crying simultaneously because it was just so different from what I had in my mind, and it was just so terrible and, you know, but incredible for me anyway, you know, so it was everything all at once. But then when I went to Oberlin and I had my first orchestral experience, and it was Brahms Academic Festival Overture. And when I put my baton up and then it came down and the orchestra, you know, and then it was like hearing the ocean. And I just felt as if I were in the cool and vast and limitless power of the ocean. And I knew that piano was always a first love for me, but that I would marry conducting.
It's such a beautiful way to say that, because I'm still working on my piano skills. I wish, but we'll get there. Now, what about you, Nicole? What was your aha moment, if there was one? You're muted.
Pardon. I'm used to doing these things where people are doing it for you, so my apologies. I don't know if there was an aha moment, but I was interested in architecture at a very young age, and I was always debating either music or architecture through, you know, my studies and that. And at one point I was, so when you study music, you start to look at full scores. And I was in Germany, I was studying there for a while, and I was playing the cello in the orchestra. And I was wanting to improve my German, and the director, the conductor said, you know, you could do sectionals and that would help you speak in front of the orchestra, and you know, so I said yes. And so he gave me a full score, and I had done some conducting and classes in my studies, but and people had said, oh, you seem to have a skill for that. And I was curious about full scores, but I remember at that time realizing, maybe because I was a little bit older, I was 16 by that time, that looking at a full score was a little bit like looking at a blueprint, and that I could see structure, texture, sound, colors, all of this in this score. And I thought, if I were to work with full scores, I would maybe blend my love for architecture and for music and be able to do both. And that was kind of a moment where I thought, when I go back, I went back to Canada, to Montreal after that, and decided to apply to do a degree and try to see if that would be the case. And that was the beginning of my conducting career, was to do that, because I realized, and I still do, I look at the score very much like a blueprint, and I enjoy that it brings me that architectural love that I really love.
That's also a very nice way to think of that. And I guess with that kind of architecture, that kind of leads us to our next portion of study skills. Like, is there a plan that you have, or like when you first, you've bought the score, it comes in the mail, you're touching it for the first time and you open it up for that first time. What are your individual steps in tackling that score, in learning the score, becoming one with the score, whatever language you would like to use? And actually, I would love for Paolo to start with this one.
Thank you, Jennifer. So depends if it is, you mean an opera score or a symphonic score?
Let's do opera, since we are.
So with an opera, I always try to start from the libretto or the novel, if I have the time, and to understand why the composer wrote that opera, because it was commissioned or because he was interested in his subject. Then I'll read the novel, the libretto, and then I put on the piano and I try to play and sing and go through the whole opera to get it in my body. It was also the training I had, especially in Germany, because Italy has a much more theoretical approach than Germany. And after I do this, I try to imagine how it could be on the orchestral score. And then I open the orchestral score and I have this idea of sound translated into an orchestral sound from the piano. And then I try just to read. The first process is to read in the most neutral way and try to understand how the voice function, an aria, a duet, and the kind of sound that the composer imagine, which is then in the end our sound, because you cannot be in the mind of composer, and then making from the macro structure going into the microstructure, the details, but it depends on the time you have. Sometimes, really, literally in Germany, they ask me, in 1 week, would you like to conduct Magic Flute? Or in 3 days, the Kapellmeister is ill. Would you like to go and do Elisir? And then you have no time to do this. You just have to go, and maybe you call the Concertmeister, you give the person, tell me where are the very difficult pieces. Here, there. Okay, thank you. And the rest you navigate. So these are the two extreme process. The best case is the first, the worst case is this, but we are somehow in the middle.
Yeah, it truly is a case-by-case basis, because the times that you can know years ahead of time, of course, you can really get into the score. And then, the times that are a little more of an emergency, it's like, just go and make sure it doesn't fall apart. What about you, Emmanuel? What study skills would you, or what's your study plan?
I agree with the way you guys talk about it. Paolo talked about it, but I think you need to have a plan. So, and in order to have a plan according to how much time you have, you need to somehow know yourself and what is it you need to work on. I have been in situation to have to learn complex scores in a day. And today I can do this, and the first thing to do is to, exactly as Paolo said, you go through the score and say where is the really tricky part, and then you work by layers, tempo, rhythmical difficulties, and then you can go into more subtle things and so on. The thing that Paolo didn't talk about is what do you do with, which is a question that comes very often, what do you do with recordings. Do you listen to recordings? You know, when do you listen to recordings? And I think there is nothing wrong in listening to recordings. They are going, especially in the operatic world, but also in symphonic world, they are going to teach you what the tradition is. And then you're going to have an opinion according to that. You're going to see how a piece sounds with a very fast tempo, with a very slow tempo. You can make choices, but it is at the same time very important to work with just the score for yourself and try to really hear it. And you will notice things that are totally different than, we were discussing this yesterday, than if you are listening with a recording. And you're going to ask yourself questions. And the question you're asking yourself are the questions the musicians are going to ask themselves. Oops, what's the tempo correspondence here? What's going on here? What's the main line here, and so on. So I think if you have time, you need to do this. Now, everybody is different. I had an assistant who could not conduct a piece unless he had written the chords, all the chords. He had written underneath them what was the chiffrage of the chords. You know, that's insane. I never do this. I feel tension and release harmonically, you know. So used to be difficult for me to figure out transpositions. Well, you don't want to get caught and they ask you about a note and it's, you know, what, the bass clarinet, and you don't know in which key it's written. So you have to work those things. And there is nothing wrong in writing in the score the chords if you are uncomfortable and if you are insecure, you know. So then again, you all have your own qualities, your own skills, the things that you need to work on. So you know that you need to find a system by yourself. I used to mark the scores a lot, and I learned a lot by just marking the score. The thing that we forget a lot is that first taste, impression, the flavor, the poetical singular point of a piece. Once we study it, we forget about it. What is so unique, so special? What makes you all of a sudden want to do that piece? Or what is it that caught your soul, your heart, and thing? And that part of the process, even if you have very little time, that's something you should never forget. Because we tend to get caught into all those details and those questions, and then we forget the music. So, I mean, there is a smart way of doing this, there is a corny way of seeing this, but I think that artistic aspect is neglected. And that's what an orchestra is going to respond to if you have the minimum technical requirement. And I'm going to forgive you so much if you go back to that source of the music. So I like to put myself, when I can, and we should and we could discuss more in detail on what are the technical things one can do and should do, like Paolo was saying. But I like to put myself in, metaphorically, the same chair than the composer when he wrote his piece, and try to feel it and see that object even before it was written on the paper. Which, of course, is problematic, because where is the piece? Is it in this calligraphy on the paper? Is it in the mind of the composer? Is it in between the moment it's going to be performed and the soul and the ears of the people who hear it? Is it in the musicians? It's very hard to say where is the piece? Certainly not on the paper. Absolutely not on the paper. You cannot ignore the paper, but if you ignore that it is beyond the paper, you're going to miss the piece. And it's really strange how musicians can be very short-minded with those things. So I think you need to always, I'm insisting on this, because all the technical things, you know them, you have heard them, and you can figure them, and maybe it's interesting for you to know how much time I spend, but it's anecdotal. But that aspect, going to the source, the soul, that little single thing that makes this piece unique, you should never lose it. And the details are going to bring it to you, and I believe the musicians are going to really appreciate if you understand that and you carry that and communicate that and emote that.
Awesome. Because yeah, truly taking a moment to sit down and kind of view it from the composer, the first time it was being created's lens, can sometimes maybe explain certain reasons of why something goes like this and why something does this or modulates here, all of that. That's wonderful, Emmanuel. What about you, Elizabeth? What happens when you first get a score? What's your plan?
Well, actually, I am rather intrigued is too weak, obsessed is a bit strong, but somewhere in between with this whole process, because we have to do everything. And I love the everythingness in conducting. And so I love the everythingness in studying. So, you know, as Emmanuel pointed out, you have to have the technique of the rigor of the architecture, understanding the architecture of these large scale works, which is why I'm very happy that I will be giving a seminar on the technique of carrure, which I learned in France, which, you know, I learned from Dominique Huit, who was a disciple of Boulez, who probably learned it from Nadia Boulanger. So it's a beautiful way and very efficient way to apprehend the micro and the macro structure of a large scale work. And this can apply, of course, to large scale symphonies, oratorios, as well as operas. So for me, it is indispensable. When I attack an opera, I love to go first to the words, right? In the beginning, there was the word. And so I want to see, clin d'œil, Emmanuel. So I want to see what the words were first, and the rhythm of the words themselves, and the music of the words themselves, the dramatic pacing, what happens. I also like these shifts in waves of people. You know, do we come and there's one person that begins? Is there an opening of an act where everybody's there, the whole town is there? What happens throughout the act? What is the first word or the first phrase that each of the characters says? That should be a haiku into the essence of each of the characters. Are they having an inner dialogue? Are they declaiming who they are and how noble they are? Are they saying how coquettish, you know, and I want your attention? What are they saying? So I always like to be a journalist as well. I'm going to ask myself who, what, where, when, why, and sometimes how, and to tackle also the blank page, as Emmanuel said. I remember when studying composition with Joan Tower, she said, look at that blank page and remember that all the great composers looked exactly at that blank page, and that blank page became La Mer. That blank page became, you know, Shostakovich Fifth, and so on. And what is your blank page going to become? And so this is amazing too. I mean, even if you take, you know, Brahms first, for example, if you know the historical background and you know that he was older and that he had to fight against the ghost of Beethoven, and when he pounds out this first unison C, you know, he defies it and he forges through. I mean, how can you not love that and then become an ambassador and a champion for that? And that's your job, is to be that ambassador for everyone, for all the musicians, for the singers on stage. Help the lighting designers do their job wonderfully so everything can be smooth and we can deliver this gripping, unique, and fantastic work. So, and by the way, recordings, I was just talking about this privately. I have a bugaboo out. You start with the score. You start with the score. Do not go to the recording. If you go to the recording, it's because you have 24 hours and you have to get the cliff notes. Otherwise, do not put a third person between you and the composer. Once you have done that work, and it is hard work, then inform yourself. Then listen to a bunch of recordings, historically informed. How do the great maestros do? How do the period instrument groups do? And really important, take notes, you know, be active in your listening, but start just with you and the composer and the traces that this composer has been able to leave in the hieroglyphics, which I love so much, of their writing.
That was beautifully said as well. And yes, of course, our live stream on Friday, Elizabeth Askren will be teaching us a little more about the COES technique. Hope I said that right. It's now on live stream. And now we're going to Nicole. What's your plan when you get a score? And I know that, like Emmanuel just helped us do Diving Bell and the Butterfly, maybe you can talk a little bit more too about what happens when it's like a brand new score. The composer is right here, the librettist is right here, and you are just bringing this piece to life for the first time. If you could unmute and let us know, I would appreciate it.
So you mute us, but you don't unmute us. Is that right? Ah, I get it now. So yes, I want to say first of all that I so agree with how Paolo started, in that it really depends. There is not one system to score study, and it really depends on the work that you are doing, what style that piece is, the time you have, where you're at with. There's so much, and I actually think we need to be nimble and know how to rehearse. To score study in various ways, depending on what we have. I will also say one comment about what Emmanuel was saying, which is so true, and that's why I think of conducting as a blueprint. When I work, I think of architecture, in that I try to get my score as much as possible as just a blueprint. It's not the end result. It is just the beginning of what it can be. And all the work that we do in studying a score and trying to understand what this is, and it is good only if we then put it to the next level and say, how am I going to use this information to create music? Because if not, it's just knowledge. 4 + 3 + 6 equals this. This is the phrase. That doesn't make the music. It makes you look at it, but you have to really, at that point, take that information and create your own interpretation of it. So that is something I think is very important. But for me, you cannot have a recipe. You really have to look at the score and decide what is that kind of score and how do I look at it. If it's a score that is completely new and you open it and it is very dense, it's going to look very different. My whole concept of how I'm going to approach it will be very different than a score that seems very transparent, very fluid, so all scores are very different. So for me, there are no one recipe for studying a score. The one thing is, yes, I think it is quite different when you have the responsibility of putting a piece, giving birth to a piece that has never been done, because you have the responsibility a great deal of making that piece survive or die in some not always. It's not always our only responsibility as ours, but it is a big responsibility, and you have to create the beginning of what might be a tradition for the piece. And so but you have that great asset of having the conversation with the composer, the librettist, at an early on. So what I love to do is get involved very early on with the creative team to talk about the piece and create a relationship that is not that I'm going to get a score at the end that's delivered to me, but I'm part of the process, and that we develop a conversation where I can I'm included, and the composers get often so comfortable that they will ask, oh, can I send you this? What do you think of this orchestration, or what do you think of this? And develop that kind of relationship, which you do not have when you're doing a score that has already been done or that is completed. So your score study is different because it's much longer term. You're creating it. You're helping it come to light in that way, and so you have that background information. So I think in that way, I think it also is a great privilege of doing that kind of work, and you have to take it seriously, because you can damage a new work forever, for a long time. If you do a poor interpretation of Shostakovich symphony, there are many people doing it, it will survive. If you didn't have the time to study it deeply and you feel, you do what you can. But I would say I would not rush jumping in a new piece and saying, yeah, I'll do it in a day, just because you need someone. I take that very seriously, and because it gives life to that piece.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've never thought about that. That makes so much sense that, yeah, that first time that a piece is ever being done, it's you, and you are helping like take it to its next level. And
Right.
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Nicole. So we are going to take a moment here, and I think we've got about 10 minutes left. Participants, do you have any questions that you would love to ask our master teachers? I know you're already meeting them one-on-one, but just any questions that you can think of right now that maybe came to you in the night? Yes, Shira.
I've gotten to talk a little bit about the conductor assistant conductor relationship with some of you, but I'm really interested in what your favorite things are, like the best things you look for in what an assistant can bring to a production, and like the most irritating no-nos that you've experienced that you can save us from by telling us in advance.
Jennifer, are you going to help us moderate, or do we
Sure,
just jump in?
I can. Nicole, let's start with you. Just unmute yourself, please.
I'll remember that. Yes, I think I enjoy true collaboration with an assistant, in that I want to have someone who will bring ideas to the table, that will know the score well and will have opinions on what they feel. I really think of it as a true collaboration, and that we work together on making that piece the best that it can be. And so having that kind of going in prepared and good listener, so that you can listen in the space when you need someone to listen and to give your thoughts on things, are things that I would look for. The no-nos, you know, I think be yourself. Don't try to be someone who you're not, and then we work, you know, no-nos would be try to be someone you're not. You know, I think you come in there, you have something to offer as an assistant, and then we work together.
Elizabeth, do you have an answer for that question as well? Thank you, Nicole.
Oh my gosh, I've been thinking about this so much, and actually it's in my hopper of things to write about, because I've been assistants to, you know, many people on both sides of the Atlantic, and now I'm my own assistants on productions. So I've really seen it from both sides a lot. What I think is the ideal for an assistant is to be truly a helper in the best sense of the word. I remember I was assisting at Chicago Lyric, and the conductor, you know, who's the music director there, wonderful, needed a pencil, and I had one, and I just handed it, and I knew that he needed it. He didn't have to ask. I just handed it to him. He just looked at me, you know. But it's such a small thing, but this is what you need. You need a pair of ears. You need to have the person go out. If they can understand your needs before you need them, it's so fluid, you know, it's wonderful. And so maybe this rapport takes a little time to establish, but also if you as an assistant have that goal in mind, I am here for the production. I am here to assist the music director in what they need. How can I help? Am I a pianist? You know, if I am, be prepared. They might need you to jump in the pit and play. You know, how else can I help? Should I ask the librarian? Ask about tempi before starting, because maybe the person is not going to be there the first day, and so you have to take over the first day. You should do the tempi of the person you're assisting and not your own tempi, and so on. Take notes. Know how to take notes that are coherent and that people can read very clearly. If you say, give me top 3 points, and the person says, give me, they're in front of the orchestra, they have 30 seconds, and they look at your scribble and they say, I have no idea what this is. Well, that was just wasted. So, you know, just trying to make it better, 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 and at the same time, respecting where you are. Have respect for your job as assistant. It's a wonderful privilege to be an assistant, but don't try to jump into the seat of the music director during that production. And I think discretion and knowing your place and being the best at what your position is at the time, it makes it, you do your absolute best, you will get noticed, you know, for your professionalism and fulfilling the duty that you're called to do, and not having the elbows and being like putting banana peels on the stairs and, you know, stuff like this, you know. And another no I think is assuming that you can go, assuming that, you know, you just, no, always check in. Maybe your conductor does not want to be bothered, but you should know, because you say, Maestro, would you like me to come 30 minutes before? Would you like me to check in at intermission? Would you like me to check in? Everybody has a different style, but you should be aware of that and cater. Always give too much, and they can tell you to scale back, is what I think. And be receptive. That's what I would say.
What about, thank you, Elizabeth. What about you, Emmanuel and Paolo? Y'all just spent the fall season of the Dallas Opera's like 23-24 season together as conductor and assistant conductor. What makes it so that y'all work together so well?
Okay, so maybe I'm going to answer. I agree with all I heard earlier, and I think the word that is the key in all of this and summarize all of this is trust. You need to feel the trust from your assistant. You need to be able to trust the assistant, and that means, I remember working with a wonderful stage director. Her name escapes me, it's going to come back, and she had 7 assistants, and she was snapping at them all the time, and she was saying, mitmachen, which means make it with me. As I am doing it, you have to make it and do it like you are doing it yourself. So if I know that my assistant understand what I am doing and he's doing it with me in my track, then I can concentrate on something because I know he has my back if I forget something else. And that can be organizational, or that can be even musical. And he can then tell me, listen, I mean, I know what you're going for here, but don't forget, you know, this tempo is rushing, and then you don't have the relationship you wanted before, or this group is not heard at all. So the place is an alter ego, and at the same time, as Elizabeth said something which is very important, do not take the place of the conductor when it's not the time, when it's not the moment. There's nothing more irritating than an assistant that's going to just discuss something when you are so busy doing something else, and it's getting in the way. And I give a lot of, when I was the assistant of Seiji or the assistant of Spiros, they would listen to me. And I learned that's very dangerous. I remember I was at the Paris Opera and I told once Seiji, I think you should try that in 2, and it was in 4. And after the rehearsal, during the rehearsal, it falls apart and it turns at me and says, you fought. It was funny, but I mean, we tried together, and I said, you know, and so sometimes you have assistants that are just don't have this psychological sense of timing, and I like to give a lot of sense of ownership to the assistant. I don't want the assistant to abuse this.
That's very, very helpful. And we only have about 2 minutes left. Paolo, I want you to be able to say your opinions on this question. What is your advice, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
It depends, again, like reading the score in symphonic or in opera. In symphonic, you never need an assistant because the level of the acoustic is the same of the audience. In the opera, you need an assistant because you have different acoustic rooms and you never know what's really happening at which level in the hall. In the early days, conductor were spending maybe half of the time and let the assistant conduct. You can read Toscanini's memories. I remember in the old time also at La Scala, because once you know the score, the orchestra knows you, all you have to hear is what's going on. So for me, the assistant is the best assistant are your third and fourth years. So staying there and being there where you can be when you are in the podium. And then have a feeling, also what Emmanuel was saying, what is needed at the moment? Is it needed just an acoustic advice? Is it needed to write down a technical advice? Or maybe he's concentrating on one matters and you realize another matters to support. And then it depends on the, I remember, for example, working with Tillemann, sometimes he was just asking, let's sit on two pianos and play together the piece. It doesn't matter what. Let's just play and have fun. Or, for example, one time, Gergiev asking advice because he said, I don't know the Italian words very well, so I cannot stretch my beat until there because I don't hear that syllab. How can I do to get with the choir? Because Italian is not my language. And then you have to try to translate. And again, for me, opera is the most complex work for a conductor, and an assistant play a crucial role sometimes in the opera.
Yes,
So,
assistants are way more than just what we define as an assistant. They are truly the people that can help make the opera everything that it should be. So,
and it's a true job that you.
Yes, it is. It's a true job.
I had to learn a lot to become a good assistant.
Well, I want to go ahead and say thank you to our master teachers, Elizabeth Askren, Paolo Bressan, Nicole Paiement, and Emmanuel Villaume for talking with us today. I know I definitely learned something new about each and every one of you, and I hope that everyone who joined today did as well. Thank you to our viewers for joining us, and thank you, of course, to our participant conductors who are also joining us on the screen. Make sure to catch our 4th live stream tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time, that's Dallas time, on our YouTube channel, and tomorrow's live stream will be called Dignity and Creativity with Robin Short and Marta Torres. And it will also be moderated by TDO's company culture consultant, Codicia Johnson. We hope to see you all tomorrow, and that's a wrap. Thank you all. Bye.